Before the mountains had names, before the sea knew a shore, there was only a floating, oily mass, drifting in the dark like a jellyfish. Then something moved. Reeds sprouted from the murk, and in that first shudder of life gods began to appear, silent, formless, and utterly alone. They say there are 8 million of them, not a number, but a promise, that everything you touch is alive with a hidden presence. A pair of gods once stood on a bridge in the sky and stirred the ocean with a jeweled spear, until an island rose from a single dripping bead. A sun once hid inside a cave, and the whole world went dark until a goddess danced so wildly that the heavens themselves laughed her out. An 8-headed serpent, its belly red as wine, coiled through the valleys, and inside its tail slept a sword that still crowns an emperor. These are the kami. The gods, the spirits, the sacred forces of Japan, worshipped in the Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki 13 centuries ago. They are not distant thunderers on a mountaintop. They live in the rice, the waterfall, the old twisted pine, the fox at the shrine gate. By the end of this video, you will know every great kami, from the ones who churned the islands into being to the ones still prayed to today. The gods who made a nation, the gods who hid the sun, the gods behind 1,000 red gates. This is every Japanese god. To meet them, we have to go back, before the islands, before the light, to a world that is barely a world at all. The word is kami. It has no perfect translation, not quite God, not quite spirit, but a power that inspires awe, dread, and reverence. A mountain can be kami, a storm, an ancestor, an emperor, a stone, anything that overwhelms the ordinary heart with the sense of the sacred. The old phrase is Yaoyorozu no Kami, the 8 million gods. A poetic way of saying uncountable, everywhere, woven into all things. This is Shinto, the way of the kami. It has no founder, no single scripture, no commandments, only reverence, purity, and the turning seasons. Our oldest map of it is the Kojiki, compiled in the year 712, and the Nihon Shoki that followed. From them we begin at the beginning. When heaven and earth first parted, 3 gods came into being in the high plane of heaven, Takamagahara. They had no gender and no form. These are the Kotoamatsukami, the separate heavenly deities. First among them, Ame-no-Minakunushi, the august lord of the very center of the sky. They appeared, and then they hid themselves away, concealed forever. The silent single gods who set existence in motion and then withdrew from it. After them rose 7 generations, the Kamiyo-nanayo. The first came alone, the rest in pairs, male and female, each a rung on a ladder toward creation. The 7th and final generation were the 2 who mattered most, Izanagi, he who invites, and Izanami, she who invites. Brother and sister, husband and wife. The elder gods handed them a spear, Ame-no-Nuboko, the heavenly jeweled spear, and gave a single command, go, and make solid this drifting land. They stood upon the floating bridge of heaven, Ame-no-Ukihashi, and lowered the spear's tip into the brine below, and stirred, and stirred, and stirred. When they lifted it, the thick salt water dripped from the point. Where a single bead fell and hardened, an island formed, Onogoro, the self-curdling isle. Down they came to stand on solid ground. There they raised a great pillar and built a hall, and turned to each other as man and wife. They circled the pillar from opposite sides to meet. But Izanami, the woman, spoke first in greeting, and their first child was born malformed. It was the leech child, Hiruko, born without bones. They set him adrift on a little boat of reeds and let the sea carry him away. The gods above told them the fault lay in the woman speaking first. So they circled the pillar again, and this time Izanagi spoke first. Now creation flowed. One after another they birthed the great islands of Japan, the 8-island country, the land we still call home. And the islands were only the beginning. From the couple poured a whole pantheon, gods of the sea, the wind, the mountains, the rivers, the trees. The kami of the mountains and the valleys, the god of the wide sea, the goddess of grain and food, the living machinery of a whole world. Then came the birth that broke everything. Izanami gave life to Kagutsuchi, the god of fire, and the flames of his birth burned her terribly. The mother of the world lay dying, and even in her agony more gods sprang from her, born from her tears, her body, her last breath. Then she was gone, down into Yomi, the land of the dead. Izanagi wept over her still form, and his grief curdled into rage. He drew his sword and beheaded his own son, the fire god who had killed her. And from that spilled divinity, still more kami were born. But grief is not so easily governed. Izanagi could not accept her loss. He turned toward the underworld to bring his beloved back into the light. He descended into Yomi, the shadowed land, and called to her through the dark. Her voice answered too late, for she had eaten the food of the dead. Still, she would beg the gods of Yomi for release. Only, do not look at me, she warned. Do not bring a light. And she went in. He waited in the blackness. He could not bear it. He broke a tooth from his comb, set it alight as a torch, and looked upon his wife. What he saw is left to shadow, a form no longer living, wholly claimed by the underworld. Horror seized him, and he turned and ran. She screamed in shame and fury, and sent the hags of Yomi howling after him. He fled through the dark, hurling down whatever he could to slow them. At the pass between the living and the dead, he heaved a great boulder across the road, and on either side of it husband and wife spoke their parting. She swore to drag 1,000 of his people into death each day. He swore to raise 1,500 into life. So the world turned still, birth outrunning death. Izanagi escaped, but the underworld clung to him, its filth, its pollution. To be clean, he went to a river mouth and stripped himself for purification. This is misogi, the washing away of defilement, still the beating heart of Shinto today. As he bathed, gods were born from every discarded thing. And then came the three most radiant of all. As he washed his left eye, a dazzling light rose up from it, the sun herself. Amaterasu Omikami, the great goddess who shines in heaven. Not a sun god, but a sun goddess, the brightest and highest kami ever to exist. From his right eye came TSUKUYOMI, the cold and quiet god of the moon. And from his nose he washed forth Susanoo, kami of storm and sea. Overjoyed, the father divided his realms. To Amaterasu, the high plane of heaven and the day. To TSUKUYOMI, the night. To Susanoo, the seas. TSUKUYOMI soon vanishes from the tales. He slays a food goddess in disgust at how she serves her meal, and Amaterasu, appalled, never faces him again. That is why, they say, the sun and moon are forever apart, one ruling the day, one the night, never again to share a single sky. But Susanoo would not take his throne. He wept and howled for his dead mother until his beard grew long, until the mountains withered and the rivers ran dry. His father, enraged, banished him. Before he left, Susanoo climbed up to heaven to bid his sister Amaterasu farewell, and the whole plain shook at his coming. Amaterasu did not trust him. She bound up her hair like a warrior, slung on 1,000-arrow quiver, and stood ready. "Why," she demanded, "do you come?" To prove his heart was pure, they held a trial. Each would birth children from the other's belongings. From her beads, from his sword, new gods appeared. Susanoo claimed victory, and victory made him wild. In triumph he ran riot through heaven, smashing her rice paddies, choking the sacred channels, defiling her holy hall. Then he did the unforgivable. He flayed a heavenly horse and hurled it through the roof of her weaving hall, where her maidens worked the sacred cloth. In the terror and death that followed, Amaterasu, the sun of all creation, fled. She withdrew into a cave and sealed the great stone door behind her, and the light went out of the world. Takamagahara fell dark. The earth below fell dark. Endless night, and with it a swarming host of calamities. 800 myriad gods gathered in the dry riverbed of heaven to plot. How do you lure the sun from her hiding place? How do you bring back the day? They gathered long crowing roosters to call the dawn. They forged a great bronze mirror and hung 500 curved jewels, magatama, upon a sacred tree. Then a goddess stepped forward. Ame-no-Uzume, the dread and dazzling female of heaven. She overturned a wooden tub, climbed atop it, and began to dance. She danced herself into a frenzy, half wild and half divine, until her robes slipped loose, and the 800 gods roared with laughter that shook the heavens. Inside her cave, Amaterasu heard it. How could there be joy, she wondered, when the world had lost its light? Curiosity cracked the stone door open a sliver. "We rejoice," Uzume called, "for we have found a goddess greater than you." And they turned the mirror toward the gap. Amaterasu saw a shining face gazing back. She leaned out to meet the radiant stranger, her own reflection, and a waiting god seized her hand and drew her forth, and light flooded the world once more. They stretched a sacred rope across the cave mouth so she could never return to hiding, and that mirror, Yata no Kagami, became a treasure of the gods. As for Susanoo, the gods clipped his beard and nails as penalty and cast him down out of heaven, exiled at last to the world of men. He came to earth in the land of Izumo beside the high river, and there he found an old man and woman weeping over a single young girl. They had once had 8 daughters. Each year a monster came and devoured one. 7 were gone now, and soon it would come for the last, Kusanagi. The monster was Yamata-no-Orochi, the 8-forked serpent. 8 heads, 8 tails, eyes red as winter cherries, its body sprawling across 8 valleys and 8 hills. Susanoo made a plan. He brewed sake of terrible strength and set out 8 brimming vats behind 8 gates, and then he waited for the beast. The serpent came. Each of its 8 heads found a vat and drank, and one by one the great heads sank down drunk into sleep. Then the storm god struck. He hacked the sleeping serpent apart, its blood turning the river red, until his blade rang against something hard within its tail. Inside the tail lay a sword, Kusanagi the grass cutter, the sword of the gathering clouds. Susanoo sent it up to heaven as a gift of peace to his sister. That blade, the mirror from the cave, and the curved jewels of the sacred tree became the 3 sacred treasures, sword, mirror, and jewel, the regalia of Japan's emperors. And Susanoo, outcast, destroyer, and dragon slayer, married the girl he had saved, and settled in Izumo, and became at last a god of the fertile earth. From Susanoo's line came another great kami, Okuninushi, the great landmaster, a gentle god who would tame and rule the whole earthly realm. His story begins in cruelty. He had 80 brothers, all rivals, all courting one distant princess, and they treated him as a baggage carrier on the road. On that road they found a hare, skinned raw and weeping. It had tricked a line of sea beasts into forming a bridge, and they had flayed it in revenge. The 80 brothers mocked the creature, telling it to bathe in salt water, which only seared it worse. Then kind Okuninushi came last along the path. He told the hare to wash in fresh water and roll in the pollen of the cattails. Healed, the hare, a kami itself, foretold that he alone would win the princess. And so he did. And so his brothers hated him, and twice they killed him, and twice his mother and the gods of heaven brought him back to life. He fled to the underworld, to Susanoo himself, and endured a gauntlet of deadly trials, a room full of snakes, a burning field, and survived them all. He won Susanoo's daughter and his grudging blessing, and rose to rule the central land of Reed Plains, the earthly realm of Japan, made whole and ordered. With a tiny dwarf god, Tsukunabi Kona, riding the waves in a bean-pod boat, he shaped the country, teaching medicine, farming, and the ways of living to humankind. But from her heaven, Amaterasu looked down on the fertile land below and declared it should belong to her own divine descendants. Okuninushi would have to yield it. This is the Kuni Yuzuri, the transfer of the land. She sent messenger gods down to demand it. Some were won over, one stayed and never returned. At last a mighty warrior god descended and sat cross-legged on the very tip of his upturned sword upon the waves, and asked, "Will you give up this country?" After a contest of strength with Okuninushi's son, the earthly god agreed, on one condition, that a grand shrine be raised for him, its pillars reaching to the sky. That promise still stands at Izumo Taisha, one of the oldest and holiest shrines in all of Japan, where Okuninushi is worshipped to this very day. Now heaven could descend. Amaterasu chose her grandson, Ninigi no Mikoto, to rule the pacified land, and placed in his hands the mirror, the sword, and the jewel. Ninigi came down upon a mountain peak in Kyushu, wrapped in the eightfold clouds of heaven. The Tensen Korin, they call it, the descent of the heavenly grandson. And from Ninigi's line, through his descendants, came Jimmu, remembered as the first emperor of Japan, and through him an imperial house that claimed descent from the sun. That is the great cycle of the Kojiki. But the kami of Japan are not only gods of old myth. Many are living still, prayed to every single day. Walk through any Japanese town, and you will pass their gates, the torii, the vermilion arch that marks the threshold between the ordinary world and the sacred. None has more gates than Inari, the kami of rice, harvest, and prosperity, whose shrines are guarded by pairs of stone foxes with keys held in their mouths. The fox, the kitsune, is Inari's messenger, cunning, shape-shifting, able to take a human form. 1,000 red gates climb the mountainside at Inari's great shrine in Kyoto. Then there is Hachiman, the kami of war and of the bow, guardian of warriors, long identified with the legendary Emperor Ojin and revered all across samurai Japan. Overhead ride the weather gods. Raijin, the thunder god, beats a ring of drums to make the storm, his face fierce, his body knotted with muscle. Beside him races Fujin, the wind god, an ogreish figure with a great bag slung across his shoulders, and from that bag he looses the winds of the world. And there is Tenjin, once a real man, the scholar Sugawara no Michizane, wronged in life and feared as a vengeful ghost, now the beloved kami of learning. Some kami sail together into harbor. The Shichifukujin, the 7 lucky gods, ride a treasure ship into the new year, bearing fortune to every home. Among them, Ebisu, the smiling god of fishermen and honest trade, and Daikokuten, god of wealth, standing on bales of rice with a magic mallet in his fist. With them ride Benzaiten, goddess of music and all flowing things, Bishamonten, the armored god of war, and Fukurokuju, Jurojin, and laughing, big-bellied Hote of contentment. 7 gods gathered from Shinto, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Taoism, proof that in Japan the sacred borrows freely and many faiths flow together into one river. But not every spirit is kind. Beyond the shrines lies the darker world of the yokai, the monsters, ghosts, and goblins of the long Japanese night. The oni, horned ogres in tiger skins with iron clubs. The tengu, proud bird and mountain spirits of the deep forest. The kappa, the child-sized water demon lurking in the rivers. They are the shadow side of a world that is alive everywhere, where the same forest that hides a healing spring can also hide a hungry ghost. That is the way of the kami, not a religion of distant thrones, but of presence, the sacred pressing close in every stone, river, and gust of wind. It asks not so much for belief as for purity, to wash your hands, to rinse your mouth, to bow beneath the gate and leave the world's dust behind. From the drip of a jeweled spear to the sun drawn out of her cave, from the 8-forked serpent to 1,000 red gates on a Kyoto hill. These are the 8 million gods of Japan, uncountable, everywhere, older than memory, and yet as near to you as the breath in your own chest. Step through the torii, bow once, and know that in this land the divine was never far away. It was only ever waiting for you to notice.